Hey everyone, welcome to The More You Know, The Better It Tastes, the most amazing podcast, out there in the world.
In the world, yeah, it's the best.
Exactly, that's right, yeah. Brought to you by San Antonio Restaurants and the Flavors of Texas. I'm Susie Lafredo.
And I'm Alan Williams.
Yes, we have an amazing podcast guest. I'm so excited.
Oh, hold on to your chairs. Today we have Luis Barrios. Him and his sister and family, they own Los Barrios Restaurant. They own La Hacienda de Los Barrios. They own Viola's Ventanas. And just our San Antonio restaurant royalty.
Yes.
Welcome, Louis.
Well, thank you, Alan. Thank you, Susie.
You're so welcome.
Appreciate the invitation.
Oh,
Yeah,
we're
we're
so
excited
glad
to have you.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, your family is an icon, are icons of San Antonio, such a history in our city.
Mm-hmm. I heard that we're thinking about changing the name of the city to the Barrios family city.
We probably could, you know.
It's got a nice ring to it.
Right. I love it.
Well, Los Barrios has been around for a long time. We're going to talk about the whole history of it. You know, a few months ago, we had your sister, Diana Barrios Trevino here, and she did a wonderful job. We talked about the menu and everything. We may get into that a little bit, and she told the story, but there's so much more because you have an amazing story, and so we want to talk about that. So just so glad that you're here today.
Thank you, Alan.
Yeah. So we know that Los Barrios, the original Los Barrios restaurant, the one that started this all is at 4223 Blanco, and that opened in 1979. But there was one before that, which we're going to talk about. You also have La Hacienda de Los Barrios at 18747 Redland Road, and that's opened in 04. And then you have Viola's Ventanas at 9660 Westover Hills Boulevard over by SeaWorld, which opened in 2013.
That's correct.
Yeah. So tell us your story. I understand that your father was killed in an accident when you were a young boy still, right? Were you pretty young?
Yes, I was 15 years old.
15, so you weren't that young.
I had just turned 15. Diana had just turned 12, and Teresa was about to be 17.
Wow. I wonder if at that age that's even harder than if you were a small child. It might
was
be.
Very hard.
Yeah, I imagine. So you were born and raised in San Antonio, is that correct?
That's right.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So people ask me what makes Los Barrios so special, and I tell everybody that Los Barrios is a love story between Jose and Viola Barrios. Our father was in Spanish radio, Spanish TV, and Spanish newspaper. He met my mother, Viola, when he was sports editor and director of sales at La Prensa, when it was a daily newspaper.
Wow.
Okay.
It had the largest circulation of any newspaper in the city, including the English-speaking
Wow, I didn't know that.
newspapers. And my dad had two radio shows on, it was either KIWW or KXX, one of the two. My mother was a secretary there, and that's where they met. And they ended up getting married, and then they had 18 years of marital bliss. And
Now, let me ask you real quick. So your dad was he was a sports guy. Was he an athlete himself? Had he, come up playing sports and stuff?
Actually, my father was a cripple. So in the 5th grade, he got pushed down the stairs at school, and it affected his growth plate, and his leg quit growing. And Dr. John Hinchy, who was here in San Antonio at Santa Rosa Hospital, did a series of operations on my father, all free, all gratis, to use to teach the orthopedic students at Santa Rosa, and he saved my father's life. Wow. And so my father had a big shoe on his left foot, and his right leg was normal. He had the big shoe, and he had a lot of operations on his hip to make it functional.
Interesting.
So,
I never knew that. Okay. Wow. And so I'm sorry I interrupted you because I wanted to know about the sports.
Yeah.
But yeah, so he was a sports guy, and then you were 15 years old, and what happened?
Well, it starts off in 1972. My mother's dream was to have a restaurant, and my dad was in Spanish radio and Spanish newspaper, and then when the newspaper started failing, he moved over to Spanish radio full-time and then Spanish TV. And so in 1972, my mother hears of a restaurant for sale, and my dad says, I don't know why I'm doing this, Viola. We have no need for this income, and it's a consuming business, but it's your dream, so I want to make all your dreams come true.
Wow. Now, why do you think that she wanted to open a restaurant so bad? What was it that in her that wanted to do that?
Well, my grandparents, which are my mother's parents, they were very good business people. But around when my mother was 4, my grandfather started drinking after their third of 5 children, and he became a serious alcoholic. But even when he was a young entrepreneur, he had bars. My grandmother would sew little dresses and roll cigarettes, and they'd go to the communities there in the Sierra mountain range in Bustamante, where they would sell to the miners, the little coffee and cigarettes and dresses. And there was a time that they rented a hotel in Anahuac, which was close to Bustamante, and it had a small restaurant, and that's where my mother got the restaurant bug. She was a great cook, but that's when she got the bug.
So entrepreneurs from way back.
Yes, my dad was Spanish radio, Spanish TV, Spanish newspaper, marketing. His cousin is Lionel Sosa. So on my dad's side, it's marketing.
Okay.
And my mom's side, it was all merchants. So we had both influences.
So cool. It's amazing.
Yeah. All right. So your dad helped your mom open that first one. It was there on West Avenue. And there's still a restaurant there.
That's exactly right. La Cazadora. My mom bought it in 1972. And then 3 years later, my dad gets killed in a traffic accident. But a story that I like to tell is I had 3 jobs there at La Cazadora. I was the dishwasher where you had to boil the water, no chemicals. We didn't have an ice machine, so I'm the ice toter. I had to go across the street on West Avenue to Texas Ice to buy a bag of ice and then navigate West Avenue, not getting run over. And then we didn't have a dumpster. We just had a trash can for the organics. So I'd have to tear up the boxes that the lettuce came in, put them in a plastic bag, put them in my mom's trunk, and then our garbage man would take those. So that was my 3 jobs.
Yeah.
Teresa, our older sister, she was a line cook. And Diana, the cute one, she was the one that was the server because between lunch and dinner, my mother was the server, the cashier, and the cook. She didn't have any help then between shifts.
Wow.
And that's when we would get there after school.
Right.
And so one day I'm in the back washing dishes, and Diana shows up waving a dollar bill like this and says, "Look what I got." I say, "What'd you get that for?" She said, I took a cup of coffee. I said, "You took a cup of coffee and you got $1?" She said, "Yes." Another day I'm washing dishes, boiling water, sweating, and Diana comes with her little hand filled with dimes. And I said, "What'd you get those for?" She goes, "Well, I was coloring in my color book, and a customer came up and said, if you tear that out, sign your name, and give it to me, I'll give you all these dimes."
Wow.
So you fast forward 30 years, and Diana's come out on Good Morning America with Emerald, Good Morning America with Sam Champion, the Today Show New York, the Food Network hundreds of times, and on and on. I have sold my house twice to get the seed money to build restaurants. Then I had to build the team. Then together we had to build the business. So the moral of the story, it's better to be the cute one than the big brother.
That's funny.
That I'm sure is true.
Yeah.
That's so funny.
And so then my father gets killed in a traffic accident. My mother gets cheated in 2 ventures, and one that my dad had gotten in against his own intuition. It was his best friend that got him into it. And after my father died, he burned my mother. And then the second one, my mother invested in another restaurant, and she got cheated in that along with another partner. And so she sells that restaurant in 1978, and she tries to pass a real estate license.
Okay.
And the class was in Spanish. The test was in English. One person in the class passed the test, and it wasn't our mom.
Wow.
And so
now, did she speak English at that point of her life?
very little.
Very little.
Very little English. And so she sacrificed her language, her ability to learn so that we could all speak Spanish. So at home we spoke nothing but Spanish, and at school we spoke English.
Right.
And so
That has to be invaluable now to have that ability to speak Spanish.
well, not only am I bilingual, I'm bicultural because we were raised like if we were in Mexico. So I not only know the language, I know the culture. It's our culture.
Yeah.
And so they say if you're bicultural, you have 2 souls because it's very different. You know, the American culture and the Mexican culture are very different, but they're very complementary, but they're very different.
Right.
Yeah.
And so my mother realizes that she's going to have to get back in the restaurant business to provide for us. So Mr. Rodriguez was one of the partners that was cheated in that second venture.
He was also cheated.
Yes, he convinced my mother to get back into the restaurant business, and she said, "Well, it's not that I believe in your business acumen. It's just that I'm desperate. I have 3 young children. I'm widowed. My mother was widowed at age 44. My dad was 46 when he died. And we not only lost our father and she lost her husband, we lost 95% of our income.
Yeah.
So we went from being upper middle class down to the bottom rung all in one day.
Wow.
So it was very difficult. My mother literally sacrificed her life.
Yeah. Your mother, she had a hard life. She did. I mean, it sounds like, she was blessed in a lot of ways, but she was a hard worker. She had a lot of tragedy in her life, and but she just kept on pushing through.
Yeah, and I
know
think,
it was all for you guys.
Well, and I think one of the words we were talking about earlier when we were talking about your story is the amount of faith that she had, which I think probably is why she was able to persevere the way that she was.
Years ago, they asked me to get 3 words to characterize my mother, and I said, well, that's easy. Amor, fe, y alegría. Love, faith, and joy. That was my mother's mantra, how she lived her life. And yes, my mother's life was physical and it was grueling, but nothing could steal her joy. Before my father died, and before, even afterwards, my mother would take things to Mexico to give away. She built a house for an individual, a cousin that was very poor. She put roofs on people's houses. She would get the school supplies at the end of the school year. Her, Diana, and Teresa would go to the stores and they would buy as many as they could, 25 cents for the tablets and 10 cents for the pens. And then at the beginning of the school year, she would take them to Mexico. We would take them, and then she would give away half of them, and the other half she would set up business people in business families members. And so I remember going to Bustamante, and we would have breakfast. Then we'd go visit family. Then we'd come have lunch. And then we would go to the poorer parts of Bustamante, which were not dangerous. They were just a lot of poverty. And so we would take our station wagon, and it was the roads were all filled with chug holes. And my mother, we would just start knocking on houses. And she would say, buenas tardes, with her beautiful cadence. And they'd say, sí, señora. And she would say, yo soy Viola Barrios, Viola Botello de Barrios, la hija de Alfredo Botello. And she would introduce herself, and they say, well, what can I do for you? And she'd say, no, what can I do for you? Wow. And we would walk into houses. I remember one in particular that was 4 walls and no roof. And my mother said, ¿Qué le pasó a tu techo? What happened to your roof? And she said, well, the last hurricane that came by blew away our palapa's roof. And there was plastic bags covering their clothes and their food.
Oh, wow.
And they had a fire going. And so my mother went and got a laborer. There wasn't really a lot of commerce or contractors in Bustamante, 4,000 people population. And then she would bring them back, and she would buy the corrugated metal. She would pay 50%. And she said, in 6 months, I'll come back and I'll review your work, and then I'll give you the balance. And so 6 months later, we'd come back, and my mother would check the work, and then she would go ahead and
wow.
Right. So, and then there was one time that she would take a bicycle to give to one of our cousins, and I said, Mom, you can't give a bicycle without a tire pump because it just doesn't work that way. You have to be able to pump up the tires. So, okay, go buy me a tire pump. So I went and bought a tire pump, and she bought a bicycle with a basket on it. Well, actually, it was one of them was given to her by Jonathan Cluck, a longtime Los Barrios customer, an attorney here. And then she gave it to my cousin, gave her some inventory. She said, on Saturdays, you're going to go to the plaza. You're going to set up your little booth. This is your beginning inventory. You're going to get your income from it. You're going to buy more inventory, and you're going to start a business. So my mother would take some of that product and turn people into business people, and the other she would give it to the poor people. So my mother was always reading glasses that were left at the restaurant for every year. She would take them and give away to these poor women. Not that they read because they were illiterate, but they would use them to thread their needles, to sew their clothes and to repair their clothes. So my mother was a very benevolent person. So before my father died and afterwards, I remember going to Mexico, and she would pack the station wagon so full that I mean, the cartels couldn't pack as good as my mother. She would take all kinds of stuff to give away. And my father was always very nervous about what does she have in this vehicle that when we cross over the border, what's going to happen here?
Right.
And so she would ask, would you like a taco? And my dad would say, not until we cross the border because I don't know what's in
Right.
this car. And there were lots of gifts to lots of family members that helped raise my mother because when my mother was younger, her father became an alcoholic. My grandparents actually divorced, which was unheard of in that time. And so my grandmother would have to go off to work to provide for her 5 daughters. And so my mother would live with an aunt or with a godmother or with a cousin. And so she missed her mother so much. And so it was something that was very hard on my mom, even back then. So all those madrinas and aunts, my mother would bring them gifts every time we went. So it would be a clock radio or maybe a TV or a little color TV, little bitty ones, but you couldn't cross them over because they thought you were selling them at the border, which my mother was giving them to people that had helped raise her.
Right.
And so my dad was very apprehensive about eating anything because he's like, I can't eat and enjoy anything until we cross the border. And then they would cross the border. He'd say, okay,
So give me the taco.
give me the taco. I can handle it now.
Yeah.
But so those are just the funny stories of our growing up. So my mother was a missionary. We were raised like missionaries. We didn't even know it.
Yeah.
And my mother was a very benevolent. And on the way there, my father that's when my father would remember, did you bring something for Leonie? Yes. Did you bring something for Estela? Yes. Did you bring something for Martita? Yes. Did you bring something for Estela? Yes.
Right.
On the way there, my father would remember.
Right.
And my mother had everything covered. And she would bring sheets and towels
Wow.
to give to the poor people because that's what they needed.
Sure.
Yeah.
And so she would take things of that nature.
It's so interesting how, as you mentioned, I mean, not only, yes, helping the people who are in need, but also helping people to become entrepreneurs and take care of themselves.
Oh,
And
yes.
so amazing.
So when my mom died, we have spiral notebooks full of interest-free, non-collateralized loans, most of them not fully repaid, that my mother gave to friends, family, customers, employees. And I used to say, Mom, you lend money out and most people don't pay us back. And she would say, well, that's because they have great need. I feel compelled to help them. I said, well, it's not like we're wealthy either. And she would say, well, we have enough, son.
We have enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you went from, like you said, well, I guess this was while your dad was still here. She was already doing all of these things.
Yes.
But I was going to say, because you went from, like you said, being in an upper class situation to in a day being in this other situation. So having experienced all of that, I can understand how it probably fueled her wanting to make sure that she was providing and helping others, having been through those situations.
My mother could stretch a dollar more than anybody because she went from being very poor when my grandfather's drinking, got out of hand, that she was able to stretch a dollar
Right.
more than anybody I knew. So we were raised very limited. So when my dad died, nothing really changed, even though our income was dramatically affected. We were just loved like we were, and we were raised, and we always had food. We got clothes once a year for back to school. We would go to Bustamante or Monterrey or both for our vacations, drive and sleep on the floor at one of our aunts or godmother's houses.
Right.
I always got a bed because I was the boy. My sisters didn't always get a bed, but
Right.
I was able to eulogize my mother 3 times, and on one of them, I said, I was born a prince, raised to be a king, crowned and robed in love. So my mother
love
just
that.
poured love into us.
Love
And
that.
so I was the one that had the expectancy to raise to the occasion.
Wow. Yeah, you can feel that. I know that some conversations we've had in the past and with Deanna as well, but your customers as well at all of your restaurants, I mean, they all feel like they're family. You've seen people who have started out as kids to now celebrating, their wedding engagements or their or bringing their children now, things like that. And it's like it's just like a family. You know so many people. Everybody that comes in feels that way. So I have a feeling that has came from how you were raised and your mom and.
Well, Henry Cisneros said it was the biggest funeral in the history of San Antonio when my mom died, 5,000 people.
Wow.
And so people would come up to me and they would say, I always thought I was your mother's best friend, but now I see that everybody was your mother's best friend.
Yeah.
So, yes, when we were children, my mother would we would get to the parties, the cousins' parties, and my mom just did this because it was in her nature. We would have to go and say hello to every one of the adults, and talk to them. And then after we got through talking and saying hello to all the adults, then we could go play. And so we didn't know, we weren't even in the restaurant business then. So my mother was preparing us for going
Right.
table to table and checking on doing table touches. We've been doing
Yeah.
that since we were little because that's how my mother raised us.
And that part of the restaurant is so important. And that's why, San Antonio, there's thousands of Mexican restaurants that have similar food, not as good, but similar food. But it's those touches that make you feel special, that make you want to keep coming back and coming back. That's so important.
It's definitely a family. And that was kind of our mission statement, Los Barrios, where the Barrios name extends beyond the Barrios family through our employees all the way to our customers. Come join the fun and become one of the family. People become part of our family, and that's the way we like it.
Yeah. Well, let's learn more about, so when was it Mr. Rodriguez that started the first restaurant?
Well, the first restaurant my dad bought for my mother.
Yeah.
And then when my mother was cheated and after my dad had died, then Mr. Rodriguez, he asked my mom, begged her to get back in the restaurant business, and she did. So she brought her Mexican recipes, and he brought his continental recipes. So that was the birth of Los Barrios with $3,000 in the old boat garage on Avenue B in Jones.
So wait. So I noticed that when I was taking notes, I had never noticed it before. Los Barrios Continental Mexican Cuisine.
Well, Paco Francisco Rodriguez was very flamboyant. As a matter of fact, Peggy Corconata and Mario Bosques used to call me when they were on PM Magazine, and they would want to get Paco on the show because he was very entertaining.
Oh, wow.
And he looked like Ricardo Montalban. He looked like Clark Gable, and he sounded like Ricardo Montalban.
Wow.
Oh, okay.
And so the media just loved it, and his personality was big. And he used to talk about the chimichurri sauce, how it was a cure for herpes, AIDS, and cancer. I mean, he was just, everything he did was, and so Mexican continental cuisine, the greatest food.
I have to
you've
tell you
ever
that
had.
chimichurri sauce is really good. So
Yeah. So, but Paco was dramatic with it, but he was a showman.
Yeah.
I remember going to weddings after the restaurant when we would get invited, and Paco was a great dancer, and my mother could follow anyone. She didn't dance with my father because he was a cripple, but she could dance, you know, and so Paco would do this Saturday Night Fever stuff, and the whole dance floor would just open up and make a circle, and Paco would just take off.
Wow.
And he was so good, whether the microphone was in front of him or whether it was a dance floor or when he was table touching, it was a show when Paco was around. He was something else. Yeah.
That's amazing. All right, so I didn't mean to interrupt, but I did notice that Continental, so that's where that came from.
That's Paco.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, so they opened it up on Avenue B, which is right across now where Elsewhere Bar is. I think it's a parking lot now.
That's right. Well, it was. It got demolition. I think it's condos now.
Oh, okay.
And it's the Riverwalk has been developed behind it, but back then it was just kind of a creek-looking edifice. And so we were there for 8 months. My mom and Paco signed a 6-month lease. At the end of that lease, they tripled the rent. She paid it for 2 months until my aunt, my mother's sister, who was in real estate, found the Dairy Queen on Blanco Road and moved over there. So they paid the triple lease for 2 months, and then they moved over there.
Moved.
Yes.
Yeah.
And at first it looked like a Dairy Queen.
Yes.
Yeah. And you've kind of built around it, all around it, because of that. I think the door is still there, right? Or the place where the door should be.
The door jamb is still there.
Yeah.
The brick is around it. And it's good because we have a lot of people from Edison and from Lee that grew up going there, and Providence.
Yeah.
And we have all their yearbook annuals,
Wow.
and there's ads for the Dairy Queen, and they have their reunions there. So it's
Nice.
there's a lot of history in that Dairy Queen. As a matter of fact, Mr. Thompson, one of the manager owners, even in his elderly years, would come in. His daughter would bring him in his wheelchair, and he would face the Dairy Queen from from the first round table so he could look at his Dairy Queen, and he would just look at it with a lot of memorability.
Right.
That's so cool.
Yeah, that is really cool.
Yeah.
So much history.
Yeah.
You know.
So once she opened the location on Blanco where it's at now, Paco was not part of that anymore.
No, he moved over.
Oh, he did. Okay.
And my mom bought him out in '84.
Okay.
Paco was very flamboyant and he wanted to keep growing and growing and growing. And my mother was very limited. She would just not want to take on too much debt.
Mm-hmm.
And so she kind of held Paco with very close reins. And so he wanted to be on his own. So she bought him out in '84.
Mm-hmm.
And he went on to open Janitzio. We let him use our Mexican recipes. They let us use his continental recipes.
Mm-hmm.
And so we had a very good relationship.
Oh, that's great.
Until the day that he died. And
Wow.
then that's when my mom bought him out in '84. From '79 to '84,
Yeah.
they were partners.
And so how old are you at that time whenever you opened the store?
Los Barrios, I was 19.
You were 19.
Yes, I was going to San Marcos my first year. Back then it was Southwest Texas State
Yes.
University.
Uh-huh.
Moved over to St. Mary's beginning of my sophomore year, and we opened up Los Barrios.
Mm-hmm.
Did you know by that point that you were going to be a restaurateur, or did you think you were going to do something else?
My mother didn't want any of us to go into the restaurant business. It was a
I
very
hear that so often.
consuming business, very difficult, and
Yeah.
she wanted something else for us. So, we went to college, and I went to work for Johnson & Johnson. Diana worked for Frost Brothers, and she worked part-time there and part-time at the restaurant. And then I guess 3 years into working for Johnson & Johnson, I had a roommate that happened to be Diana's boyfriend, and he came to me one night and he said, "Louis, this is none of my business, but the business is consuming your mom. They take advantage of her, and she's as kind as can be, but she comes in, and let me just describe, I'm there with your sister at her house at midnight, and she walks in with her bags, and she comes in and she graciously greets us as she always does, and then she goes back into her bedroom, never to be seen from again. And she worked 7 days a week, 362 days a year at the time when
Yeah.
post Christmas and Thanksgiving. He said, if your mom is around in 5 years, I'll be surprised.
Wow.
And this is really none of my business, but I just feel compelled to tell you. You do whatever you want with that information, but if I were you, I'd go back to the restaurant and help her.
Yeah.
And that's when I went back, April
Wow.
of '86.
Thank goodness he did that, Yeah. When you have people in your life that are willing to come and tell you so that you can step in and help. So what did your mom think about that you show up? And
Well, she loved it because, from the first day, her answer was, go ask Louis, go tell Louis. It was like, the burden
Right.
is yours. My
Right.
mother gave me a lot of authority.
Yeah.
She gave me a lot of responsibility, but she gave me the authority to fulfill that
Nice.
responsibility to
Right.
this day. So I have a duty and an obligation both, and I've been able to fulfill on both of those.
Yeah.
So I looked this up because you were talking about how she would come home at midnight exhausted. You shared with me some photos of an original menu from back in the day, and it's amazing. The restaurant was open 7 days a week from 7 a.m. until 10 p.m. Friday and Saturday nights, or 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, or 9, Monday through Thursday. Those are long hours. And then on Sunday from 11 to 8.
She opened at 11 because she went to church on Sunday mornings, so that's why she started a little later.
So she had very little time to herself.
She didn't have any time for herself.
Yeah.
She sacrificed her life not only so we could learn Spanish, she sacrificed her life so we could have a life.
Wow. That's incredible.
So when you came back, was she able to then have some time?
Well, I tried that. Let's see. Diana would have Monday off. I would have Tuesday off, and I gave Mom Wednesday off. And so she was off for the first Wednesday. The second Wednesday, she got there at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. The third Wednesday, she was back at her regular time and said, "Don't make me go home." So I said, "Mom, I'm not making you go home. I just thought it'd be nice to have a day off."
Right.
Well, it's not. But
Yeah.
it turns out that my mother missed my father very much. And for her to be busy was the best. So
Sure.
Josh Riley, our VP of operations, always says, when your dad died, your mother did not marry another man. She married a restaurant.
That's
Yeah.
a good point. Wow.
That makes sense.
So little by little, you kind of, as you started running the restaurant, that's when you started expanding the restaurant and
Yes.
building on all sides of the old Dairy Queen and making it larger and larger. How many times you've expanded that restaurant?
1, 2, 3. 3 times, and then 3 houses were converted into parking lots.
Yeah, because you even have a parking lot across the road. So
I
yeah,
had to
so you
get all
got a
those
lot of
rezoned.
parking.
Yes.
Yeah, that's amazing. And then at what point, and it was in 2004 that you opened up La Hacienda de los Barrios, and she was still around. And was she in favor of you opening up another restaurant?
Well, twice I sold my house to have the seed money to expand one Los Barrios and then to build La Hacienda. Now, my mother never asked me to sell my house, but my mother never stopped me from selling my house. So
Okay.
she said, well, if you think this is what we need to do, then this is what we need to do. So she was glad to hand over the responsibility to me. And thank God we did that, or else I don't know how we would have survived the road construction. We had a 6-year road construction project. It was the
Wow.
2012 bond election. And probably in 2017, they had a 6-year road construction project in front of Los Barrios. It was multi-phased, and in front of us, it was only for a year, but when you add it up, it was a 6-year road construction.
Yeah.
If we didn't have La Hacienda, we probably not would have survived that.
Right.
Yeah,
Wow.
I remember seeing you on the news back in those days talking about it.
Yes.
It's so hard, and it still happens today to so many different restaurants. That road construction. I mean, progress has to happen, but unfortunately, that can kill a restaurant really easy.
Well, unfortunately, the city criteria usually uses the low bid. And when you have the low bid, you don't have it indexed for any overtime hours so that you can work faster. And and then with the COVID crunch, the city held those road construction companies their feet to the fire. They had to finish that road construction job with the same amount of money they bid pre-COVID.
Wow.
And so they had less and less money to do a fast job. So that's politics, right? If you don't get involved, if you're not part of the table to discuss the issues, you'll be on the menu, is what they say.
Right.
So I'm very involved politically, and the reason being because I used to walk into the office wherever I had my mom's TV. She'd be watching the news in Spanish, and Spanish media is very different than English media. They give you a lot of information. And I would walk in, and my mother would be very concerned, and she'd say, listen. And it would be an issue affecting the restaurant industry. And she said, how is that going to affect us? I said, I don't know, Mom. She goes, well, we need to find out. And that's when I got involved with the San Antonio Restaurant Association and started lobbying. And then I started going to fundraisers. And, of course, $100 check here, $200, that doesn't amount to much. So then I started bundling money for these electeds and started working the political process in order to have a voice that people would listen to.
Right.
And so
Wow,
that's just
So smart. Yeah.
it's necessary.
It's necessary, but there's so many. There's a lot of business owners that don't realize and understand the importance of doing that.
Yeah. We better stop here and take a commercial break, and then we'll be back and hear some more of this amazing story. Luis Barrios is our guest today. Him and his family own the Los Barrios Continental Mexican Cuisine at 4223 Blanco. They also have La Hacienda de los Barrios at 18747 Redland Road. And, of course, there's Viola's Ventanas at 9660 West Silver Hills Boulevard. And we'll be right back.
If you don't know me, my name is David Dyken. I'm with San Antonio PS. We are the local SkyTab sales and service office here in San Antonio, Texas. We come in with no money up front. We take a copy of the merchant's menu. We program it. We professionally install it. We train them how to use it and provide unlimited support for both the hardware and the software. We're on site today at Max and Louie's, probably one of the most demanding hospitality environments here in San Antonio. and they're a great showcase for our technology. We have kitchen display systems, we have table-side ordering and payment devices, integrated online ordering for one of our favorite customers. So some of the features that you can enjoy with your POS system as a merchant is you'll have an included free loyalty program, a gift card program, free integration with third-party companies like DoorDash and Uber Eats, inventory control systems. We have a reservations module, lots of freebies that you're going to be paying a premium price for with other systems. There's no money up front. There's no risk to a merchant when they come on board. They pay for shipping and shipping only. They get to use the equipment for 30 days. If they don't like it at the end of the 30 days, you just ship it back. No obligation. At the end of 60 days, if they're happy with their system and they want to keep it, then we give them a $5,000 sign-on bonus just for coming on board. So it helps defray all costs for getting your new POS system. I'm David Dykin with San Antonio POS. Come visit us at sanantoniopos.com. Thanks.
And we are back. This is The More You Know, The Better It Tastes. And we are here today with Luis Barrios. And Luis and his family own Los Barrios Continental Mexican Cuisine, La Hacienda de los Barrios, and Viola's Ventanas. And he has an amazing story. And we've learned that at this point you have Los Barrios and you also have La Hacienda de los Barrios, which is fabulous place out off of Redland Road. That's close to my house. That's the one I go to most of the time because, man, you've got the best patio around. It's beautiful trees, and you got live music and great margaritas, of course.
Yes.
It's just a great place.
Well, and I have to say some of the best enchiladas in town because your Tex-Mex enchiladas are a fave in my house.
Thank you, Stacey. Well, just to know, only one person encouraged me when I built that restaurant. Everybody told me I was going to go broke because
Really?
It's out in the middle of nowhere, but it's in the middle of everywhere.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have great visibility, but it's great access. And so I had people come out because they were so discouraged for me. They thought I was going to go broke out there. And they got out there to our day one grand opening, and there was 1,000 people there. And they're like, Louis, I was very concerned for you, but now I'm concerned for me. Am I ever going to get to eat?
Right. That's funny.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so, but 90% of our market out there are women. It's a sea of women with their friends, women with their families,
Yeah.
women with their organizations. So 99% of the people told me I was going to fail out there were men. So what do men know about women anyway?
Exactly.
Nothing.
Well, and you have it all. You have a playground so that
Yes.
we can go and
Yes.
kids can play, and yeah,
It's
really
a
cool.
sea of women. Live music, margaritas,
Right. Hey,
play
you know what?
area, everything that women want. We do landscaping.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love it.
So that's amazing. So you actually sold your house twice in order to fund some of these restaurants that
Yes,
you did.
with the seed money.
Yeah, to get it going, and but they've all been successful, and you're very blessed in that way. At this point, you said that your mom was not. She didn't encourage you to open it, but she didn't discourage you. Did she go out there much?
She would go out. I would convince her to come out every now and then, and she would go straight to the play area to watch the children play. That's what made my mother.
Yeah.
My mother played with dolls until she was 15 years old.
Wow, yeah.
She wanted to be a mom so bad, and her cousin would go to the little tienditas in Bustamante, and they were pretending they were going to pick out those dolls for their little younger sisters, but it was
they were for
them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you mentioned that your mom one of her attributes was joy. You know,
Yes.
that she was such a joyful person.
Yes, yeah. There's many. When my mother died and we forgave my mother's killer, it freed up people. Instead of people approaching me and my sisters, or my sisters and I, talking about justice and revenge, they were free to talk about the love that they shared with my mother and stories about my mother, how they would be a young family and the wife would be struggling trying to eat with the baby, being very fussy, and my mom would come and take the baby and walk her around the restaurant and giving mom time to eat, mom and dad, and
Wow.
then come back. And then my mother would have these little Chupa Chup lollipops and these mints, and she would give to the children if it was okay with the mom. And so those are memories that a lot of customers were able to come and share with us about our mother. So whenever there's forgiveness, there's liberty, and where there's liberty, there's joy, and there's opportunity to talk about love instead of justice.
Yeah. I mean, I know. So Louis, you had mentioned that you would be okay with telling the story of what happened to your mom. I mean, that was such a.
It shocked the city. It
yes.
shocked. It was just one of those moments. So this is 2008.
Yes.
What happened?
So the next door neighbor, 18-year-old kid, breaks into my mother's house at 4 a.m. She sits up in her bed. He shoots her in the head with a bow and arrow. Then he gets her body off the bed.
He brought a bow and arrow with him.
He did.
To break into a house.
Yes. And I think he'd already been in there many times. My mother was about to be moving to a new house that we were building for her next to Diana's house. We were 12 days away from moving her to the new house. I didn't want her living there by herself as she got older, and so we had bought the lot. My mom had bought the lot next to Diana's house when she moved in to her house, and that's where we were building the house. And so in the backyard of my neighbor's house, or my mom's neighbors, they have the targets for the bow and arrow. That was one of the hobbies that my mother's neighbor shared with his son in order to bond. But if you think about it, it's a silent weapon. And so he breaks in at 4 a.m. She sits up in her bed, shoots her in the head with the bow and arrow, gets her body off, then goes to get the arrow out, only gets the shaft, steals her car, her purse, her credit cards. They goes to the local Valero where they have them on video, paying for gas, opening my mom's trunk, filling up a container of gas, closing my mom's trunk, driving it to her house, dousing everything, lights it, and goes on a shopping spree. Wow. And they caught him that night at midnight. He confessed to the crime, but later he recanted because he said, "I'm sorry I did it," but he didn't say did what. And so at the funeral, I publicly forgave him and offered to pay for his defenses. And the headline in the paper was Barrios Funeral, Shocking Twist, Spirit of Forgiveness. So I forgave my mother's killer, and people didn't understand it, but when the death of my father, I focused on the loss, and I was very unforgiving, very inconsolable, and my anger was focused at God Almighty because he allowed my father to die. And they had such a beautiful love story that I didn't understand, why he had to be taken from us. And so that led to alcohol abuse, drug abuse, sexual immorality for 15 years until I finally got to the end of my rebellion, gave my life to Christ. And then I started wrestling with the scriptures on forgiveness, and the Lord revealed to me that forgiveness is not an emotion, it's a decision. You decide to do it. When Jesus turned the other cheek, he decided to turn the other cheek. And so once I understood that, then I started practicing forgiveness with a lot of people that had hurt me. A fifth grade teacher that was very physically abusive to me and taking my money and hitting me, spanking me just about every day in front of the class, not only me, but others as well. And then when I was 15, the death of my father, I forgave the Almighty for allowing my father to die. When I was older, an ex-girlfriend that was very unfaithful and her mother who was very cruel. And so I forgave all these people that embezzled from us, some over 150,000. So I just practiced forgiveness. And then my mother died, and I went into forgiveness right away, and that's what shocked most people. John Quinones from ABC Primetime wrote a book called The Heroes Among Us, and he came and interviewed my sisters and I, and he said, "I'm not surprised that y'all forgave your mother's killer. I'm surprised how quickly you did it." But I had been practicing forgiveness now for probably 5 to 7 years.
So all of that happened during that period where you were practicing forgiveness.
Yes.
It all happened for that reason.
Yes, yeah. And so, but my mother used to read Psalm 91 every day, and I used to tell her, "Mom, there's 150 Psalms. You read the same one every day." And I say, "Get a bookmarker because the pages around Psalm 91 are getting fringed." And she would say, "Well, that's not important to me, son. But if you go to verse 5, it says, 'Thou shalt not be afraid of the terror by night, nor of the arrow that flieth by day.'" So every day my mother read, "Viola, you will not be afraid of the arrow." And there's a lot of other scriptures that support my mother's sacrificial death that she had. So I had learned not to question the ways or the judgments of the Almighty once my mother died. So I immediately went into forgiveness and just, she'd always, me and Diana would be having lunch or something, and my mom would sit down and she would say, I just want to say one thing to y'all. When I die, I don't want everybody sad. I want everybody happy. I want them celebrating my life, not mourning my death. She was preparing us because the way we all reacted when my father died, there was all four of us, Teresa, myself, and Diana, and my mother. It didn't matter who was in front of us for that whole weekend or that whole week. We were just all in tears, unconsolable, all four of us. And she didn't want us to revert back to that day. She wanted us to celebrate her life. So she gave us permission to celebrate her life after she had died, not knowing how she was going to die.
Right.
So,
well, and you turned this horrific thing that occurred into light, which is, huge. Like you said, the one of the first articles that comes out is talking about how you immediately forgave. So you
Yes.
turned this horrible thing that happened into light.
well, I just reacted. And in Judaism, they teach that, God is, a picture of it is God is the sun, and then we are the moon. And the moon has no light in and of itself. It's just a reflection of the sun. And so when the moon is full, it's radiant, but it has no light of itself. So all I allowed to happen was God to shine his glory off of me. And I just reacted based on everything that had happened throughout my life preparing me. I've never been more prepared for anything than I was for my mother's supernatural sacrificial death.
Other than the courtroom, have you seen this young man since then?
I have not, but Ken Rodriguez went and interviewed him for a follow-up article, and so he met with him. But he continues lying about everything, and he's preparing for an amicus brief that he'll never be released. He got capital life without the possibility of parole, which is the best place for him because he doesn't need to be hurting somebody else.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that's true. And does his family still live in the house?
I believe they do.
Yeah. Wow. I remember reading, it's amazing, and I was so touched whenever reading. I didn't know you at that time, but knowing that you and the family had forgiven him right away. But you wanted to pay for his lawyer. Right? You weren't able to do that, but you wanted to.
Well, Bobby Barrera, many people called me, and I would look down and my voicemail was full, so I would write down everybody's name and clear and then whatever phone call I could answer at the time, I would answer. And they were all the same. They would say, Louis, I heard your mom died, and I'm very sorry, and I wanted to call you right away, but now that I have you on the phone, I don't know what to say. I said, well, I know what to say. And they said, what's that? I said, when Job lost his children and his wealth, he said, naked I came out of my mother's womb, and naked shall I return there. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. And so I had a lot of attorneys tell me that the Estradas were calling many attorneys for representation, and nobody would take it. And so Bobby Barrera Plus told me, he gave me a price of what it would cost. And so at the funeral, I said, we'll pay for his defense. And that's when the media and the city went crazy. And then, of course, when I reached out to my attorneys, I said, Louis, you can't do that because the cynic would say that Barrios is a genius. He forgives his mother's killer. He pays for the defense of the attorney to take a dive, thus getting his revenge while acting like he's forgiving.
Right.
What a genius. So I had to retract that offer. And the district attorney was able to get him good representation. And so that's why he'll never be able to appeal it because it was so well, he was so well defended.
Wow.
Well, I know you had mentioned that, everybody thought your mom was their best friend. And then at her funeral, there's so many people there. They're like, wow. I mean, I just remember, and I was, a kid at the time. I was younger at the time. And I remember hearing it through my mom, that this had occurred. And of course I didn't even know Los Barrios. I didn't know any of it. But she was physically upset, crying, hearing this story, reading the story, and I said, "What happened? What happened?" And she told me she was just like this wonderful woman who, Anyway, it's amazing how even my mom, her passing touched, And yeah,
In my lifetime, my mother didn't use profanity not one time, and she wouldn't even burp in public. She was 100% a lady, and there are still some of my mother's friends to this day that can't go into Los Barrios because it's too hard on them.
Hard. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Do you remember where were you when you got the phone call?
I was at home. Deanna called me up and told me that there was a fire at Mom's house, and I said, well, isn't she at her massage today? I got her days confused. The next day she was supposed to go to her massage appointment, and I thought, well, she used to light candles and pray, and I thought, well, maybe, something turned over or something, and that's how the fire started. And right when I'm talking to her on the phone, a firefighter walks up and asks Diana if my mother lived alone, and she said yes. He said, well, we have found a corpse of a person, and so we are now considering this a crime scene. So I was on the phone with her as I was driving over there.
Wow. So your sisters, did they also, just as quickly as you, have that same feeling of forgiveness? And
Well, yes. My mother, she was cheated. A lot of things happened, but my mother, nothing could steal her joy. And so she was a very forgiving person. We never talked about capital punishment, but how my mother always took a back seat. Anytime I got Small Business Leader of the Year or Restaurateur of the Year or whatever award, she was there on the second row giving me the standing ovation. So she wanted us to be more successful than her. So she always put herself second. And so when I realized that they were going to do the death penalty, then I know my mother would not want him to be executed on account of her. That was not her nature. She was always glad with being the second row. Now, she wouldn't want him to be free,
right,
because she wouldn't want him to hurt anybody else, but she wouldn't want him executed on behalf of her. So I knew what my mom wanted, what her desire would be.
Yeah.
And so...
Well, so out of this came your third restaurant, Viola's Ventanas.
Yes.
And you built that in memory of your mom.
Yes.
Your mom was Viola, Ventanas, the windows, they were watching over. And is it different, the recipes, the menu, is it different than your other two restaurants?
They were initially. We had nachos Bustamante and caldo de pollo and fideo. Items that Mother cooked for us when we were younger were represented. But since COVID, we had to just really make our menu smaller, and we still should make it even smaller because all that is inventory dollars. And so we've got to, it would be best if we could even make the menu smaller. So they've kind of all come out to there's a few items that are unique to the restaurants, but very few.
Yeah.
So what was your mom's I guess favorite contribution to the menu?
Well, we don't have it on the menu right now. Chicken a la Viola was one of her main plates, and there was a lot of them, but the chicken a la Viola was probably.
Are you planning on bringing that one back eventually?
You have to talk to Diana about that.
Okay, I'm going to because I want to try it.
Because if you ask our CPA, he'll say no.
Okay, got it. Maybe it can be a special dinner thing.
Yeah.
No.
Wow. Well, this has been amazing.
Yes.
And I appreciate you coming and telling this story. I've heard parts of it, but not all of it, and all of it together. And so, yeah, thank you, Louis. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you, Susie.
Oh, thank you. I mean, it's such an honor to have you here, first of all. But yeah, just I hope that everybody who hears this story, it inspires them and creates some joyfulness and some brightness in everybody's life.
At one of the times I eulogized my mother, the 3 times I said, the last few days, God has been, my mother's been honored and God has been glorified. So I wish the same for this recording, that Los Barrios is honored, but God is glorified.
Yes.
Amen.
I love that.
All right. And with that,
yes,
I think we should say goodbye.
That's perfect.
So everyone, Los Barrios, the original Los Barrios is at 4223 Blanco Road. It's at Blanco and San Angelo. La Hacienda de Los Barrios is at 18747 Redland Road. And, of course, Viola's Ventanas is at 9660 Westover Hills Boulevard. If you've never been to any of the restaurants, you need to get over there.
You've got to go.
Come join the fun and become one of the family.
There
exactly.
you go.
That's right. Oh, and by the way, So Los Barrios is one of our Flavors of Texas partners. So
That's
that
right.
means that they are part of our VIP Gold program. So
Yeah. Be looking.
so it's a
looking.
free
You're gonna have us-
program. I know we talk about it all the time, but it's a free program. Anybody can join.
Yes.
So you just jump on www.theflavorsoftexas.com. You can click the little button to create a free VIP Gold Club member account. And with that, you receive perks and gifts and cool things at local restaurants across town. So
There you go.
I'll join.
That's right. All right. Well, we will be back again next week with another great interview. So be sure and share this interview with your friends. Please tell everyone about this.
Yes.
We want you to listen to the podcast, particularly this particular episode. It's wonderful. So please tell everyone about this, and we'll be back again next week. Louis, thank you for being here today.
Thank you so
Thank you
much.
so much.
It's amazing.
All right. All right, Susie. We'll see you next week.
See you next week.
All right. Bye.
Bye, everyone. Eat local.